So welcome to the Microsoft 365, migrating to Microsoft 365. My name is Andrew Phay. I work for the Whatcom Conservation District. I am the IT and GIS coordinator, the analyst, whatever. I do all the IT stuff along with GIS. And we're here today to go over a couple of instances of migrating to Microsoft 365 and what it takes to actually do that. And I'm just sorry, I'm making my screen a little bit smaller. And a little background, I've done this for our district last year. We started it in January last year, and we just happened to hit it just as COVID started. And we were in the process of migrating our email when we all got sent home. So we started it just before everybody else started doing it when the pandemic hit. And then starting this year, I also helped Skagit Conservation District move to Microsoft 365. And the two differences there is, one, we were working on a Windows Server and Exchange system. So Microsoft Exchange, we migrated from Microsoft Exchange to Microsoft 365, whereas Skagit Conservation District went from a regular old style SMTP mail system, and then we took that and moved it over to Microsoft 365. So two different types of migrations, and they have to go two different ways. Most districts will essentially be going from an SMTP setup, old style mail system, to Microsoft 365, or they might be coming from Gmail. So we'll touch on a little bit of both, but not too much. Let's see. We want this over there. Okay, some of the pros and cons, we'll just go over a little bit of those for Microsoft 365. There we go. One of the biggest things we like about Microsoft 365 is that people can work from anywhere. And I'll probably stress this a couple of times during this presentation and others I do today. Being able to work from anywhere. And when I say anywhere, I do mean just about anywhere. We have people working from home that are sharing files back and forth. And because we moved to Microsoft 365, all their data is backed up in the cloud. We don't have to actually worry about coming into the office, getting files, going to USB drives and all that kind of stuff. I went down to California in October last year, and for 10 days, I worked on a patio with a pool and a hot tub for 10 days. And that was awesome. And I didn't have any major issues in that. And going to 365, it does provide a lot of security and reliability because there are those backups and because it is housed off-site. You don't have to worry about your on-site servers and someone has to be there if the power goes out and that kind of stuff. It provides a lot of security. It's not perfect for security, but it does provide a lot of it. Another great thing, you can ask Nicole about this. She loves Teams, and we started it on Microsoft Teams, and we probably will not give it up ever because it is a great communication platform for just chatting back and forth, making phone calls, seeing each other's desktops, even working on files and working in groups. or Teams, as Microsoft puts it. Another pro for the G3 licenses, and we'll go over that in a second, is that you have the latest programs in Microsoft 365. Because of the way Microsoft 365 is created, it's a subscription. And with the G3 license, you get all the desktop programs. So your Excel, your Access, your Word, they will be the latest versions. And that is a good thing because we at the WCD are still using to save a little money. We're using Office 2016, and because it is slightly older, it doesn't work as well with Microsoft 365 and the online sharing systems. So having that extra, the latest programs is a very good thing. And working with software, most districts use Office, and if they stick with Excel and Word and all that, it's a lot easier to stick with that than go to some other Office suite. This is a big thing for me, compliance. And when we talk in compliance, that means saving all that data for 2 years, 7 years, whatever you set it up to be. And I put that in parentheses, the if set up correctly. I was told one district, when they bought it, their systems administrator that set it up for them did not set it up correctly. And you just got to make sure all that is set up correctly. Some of the cons, you have to pay subscription fees for the rest of your life, essentially, when the duration of the use of Office. So those subscription fees, depending on where you're getting that funds, can be pretty pricey. It does open up different security threats. So this goes along with provide security and reliability in the pros, but when you start working from home and being able to have those files anywhere, well, someone is working from home and a child gets on their computer and has access to all that. So there are security issues when working from home or working with Microsoft 365, but it does, it's kind of, you get the extra help and the greatness of 365, but you also have the downfalls of it, and you have to make sure it's working. All your employees are working with good procedures and that kind of stuff, so you don't lose data or someone that shouldn't be on it is not getting it. Some of the licensing information. So because we are conservation districts and we are government local agency, we have to go with what is called a GCC license. And I can't remember what GCC exactly means, but it is a government license, and you have to go through a third-party reseller. So you have to contact the state purchasing and get a third-party reseller. Both WCD and Skagit CD use shi.com, SHI, and you have to essentially purchase it all in 1 year, a year subscription, and so you pay it once a year. The two subscriptions that are usually used are the G1 and G3. A G1 is essentially you get email and on all the online systems. That is what Whatcom CD uses, and it's about approximately $8 a month. It depends on how many people you have and when you actually got it set up and all that kind of stuff. We have all the online stuff, and it comes with email, OneDrive, SharePoint, Teams, and all the Word, Excel, PowerPoint online. But like I said, we use Office 2016. So we haven't we're saving a little extra $10 a month per person right now, but eventually we will have to go over to G3 because our software is out of date. Skagit CD is doing $18 a month, the G3 license, and they get all of the current desktop applications. And I suggest going to the G3. It causes a lot less issues. Exchange, when you're doing a migration to 365, Exchange houses all of the email, the calendar, the contacts, and that kind of stuff. It works amazingly well with the Outlook desktop app and the web app and the mobile app. You just have to put in your username and password and it connects. And you don't have to put in SMTP servers or anything like that because it's Microsoft 365. It already knows where all that information is. Teams, like I said, it's great video chatting. And the groups are just amazing. Let's see, Spotlight here, you can see the different groups we have for our system. We have the staff. We have, this is just the groups I'm involved in. Information, which is our education. They came up with a very fun name for it. We have Facebook outreach. This is a project, the NWQI is a project that we did. And we had a group and we shared files through that and it worked out great. And we can chat, ask questions to the whole group. It works out great. Then we have CD, staff and board, and an admin team. Let's see, no, I have to turn that off. There we go. So teams, group chats that you can follow. And when I say follow, you actually have to click on those 3 dots and say follow this group to get notifications. Project teams, like I said, the NWQI one was a project team. Subject teams, and I have a IT, it's not a team, but a sub team underneath the team called IT Help. And if I have something I need to get out to the entire staff, I can easily post that and everyone gets notifications of, you know, like there's a timesheet issue or I'm restarting the servers at 3 o'clock today or something like that. And it lets everybody know. What else we got? Yeah, screen sharing and collaborate on files. Over here, these are all the list of files that we've in our water use efficiency right here, water use efficiency team. These are all the files that we've shared in that team. And it'll go back, I believe, 2 years worth. That's what our compliance, and that's what we save. We can set it for longer or shorter, however we want. And from there, we can actually go in and edit and share editing inside of Teams on documents. So if it's a Word document, Excel document, that kind of stuff, we can actually, all of us go in there and look at it and edit it, and everyone sees it directly inside of Teams. Also, Teams you can get on smartphones. Okay, back to that. One of the things I like the most on Microsoft 365 is SharePoint / OneDrive, and that even in our office, people get confused by the difference of SharePoint and OneDrive. OneDrive is the interface for SharePoint, but OneDrive uses SharePoint to actually work. It's confusing, but it essentially means all those files are up on Microsoft 365. Even Teams uses SharePoint to store all its files. But with that, with SharePoint and OneDrive, you can do a lot of things. So on the desktop, as I said, OneDrive is used as the interface. So you can see up here, I have OneDrive, and then I have two different SharePoint servers, one for Skagit CD and one for Whatcom CD. And you can have as many as you want. And I have multiple SharePoint, what are called sites. Those sites we have a company drive, we share files through that. We have a conservation planning, so all of our planning documents are on there. And we have a CREP SharePoint site. And when we say sites, it's not just sharing files. You can create essentially an intra-site, an intranet that everyone can get to, and it gets information. Down here, you can see the latest documents in, this is not ours, this is just because we don't actually use this option. You can see with all the documents, the recent documents, and the activities people are doing. You can have your users post to it, so you can have an intranet site for that particular project if you want. Let's see. And these are our active sites. And you'll see a couple in here that are people set up as a team because they wanted to test it out. And because of the compliance software, it is not easy to delete a team, which also creates a Microsoft SharePoint site as well. So some of these, I still need to go in and delete them because Annika here set up one to test out, and she didn't know it was going to create an active site. But the company, the conservation planning, and the CREP, those are our main folders essentially that we use for SharePoint. Back to a little bit of the compliance stuff. Let's see what time, okay. This is essentially built for public records requests and that kind of stuff. It is built that complex so you can actually say, hey, I need to make this particular email account, they can't delete anything. It's they can't do anything with this SharePoint folder or something like that. You can actually do a search in here and export everything. Just one search that searches for, like down here, you can see we had a folder went missing, and I could go in there and search, and then I could take everything that matches that search and export it into a zip file. And if I wanted to, I could send that off to a lawyer and say, this is what we have on our server about this information. Have fun going through it, kind of thing. So that's what this was built for. But it also makes a great, so I deleted this file, where's it at? We've done a couple of those things. So yeah, this is a little bit explanation. Because it's a government thing, it has all the requirements for cloud services. And it's not just files, it is Teams and email. So everything coming and going out, it will save it. So if the user does delete those spam files, compliance software will still keep those spam folders, spam files for the duration that you set. So I have it set for 2 years, except for certain folders and files that need to be longer. So when you're doing a migration, the biggest thing I can tell you is plan your migration really well. So get with whoever's doing your migration, plan it out, talk to the users, and do some planning. And I stress this a lot because without that planning, you can get into a lot of problems. So I went over this a little bit already. So types of migrations for districts. We had an Exchange server. and we went over to Microsoft 365. And when you do that coming from a Windows server, those username and passwords and accounts will migrate as well, along with the calendars and contacts and that kind of stuff will migrate with coming from an Exchange to a Microsoft 365. If you're doing SMTP, which is the normal, the old style old style email systems, like if you have a local ISP provider that you're getting your email through, that's SMTP. That you can go IMAP and all that kind of stuff, but you will be dragging from the SMTP. When you're doing that, it will not migrate your username or passwords. So you will have to set up your own. So for each user, you'll have to set up a user account for that person. And that may take a while, but you can easily do it by setting up an Excel sheet like the one in the lower right. You can have your usernames and passwords. Most of the time for Microsoft 365, your username is your email address. So you can set that up and put a password in there, upload that Excel sheet, and everything is created for them. Calendars and contacts will not migrate over an SMTP migration. So be aware that when you migrate, only the email will come over. But Microsoft does have migration wizards. With the calendars and contacts, you can essentially export from Outlook to a PST file, and that will save all your contacts and that kind of stuff. We did come into some issues with distribution lists and that kind of stuff, but if you are using the same Outlook profile, all those distribution lists will come across as well. So essentially your Outlook you have now, you're just going to point it to a new server and say, okay, now get it from Microsoft 365. All that information is still there, and you have to manage it and make sure it's all, it works, but I'd still back those all up just in case something goes wrong. Items that must be addressed when you're doing a migration. Choose your domain wisely. I've seen some very interesting things, and think about this because this will be there the rest of the time that you have a Microsoft 365 account. This is what's called a tenant. Essentially, you can imagine as a server, but don't make this Whatcom. Like we have another one that we had to set up for Sage, our account software. We had to set up an account, and the person that set it up as Whatcom Conservation District. That was way too long, and it makes for a very long server name, a domain name. So choose it wisely, choose what will work for you. It could be WCD if I wanted to. It could be Whatcom-CD if I wanted to. Good communication with your current email provider, whether it's Google. There's a whole migration setups if you're coming from Google that make it pretty simple. You don't even need to contact them for anything. But if you're going from a local ISP, make sure you tell that ISP you're moving and what they need to do, get all the information so that they know you're doing this, because you could run into issues if you don't. And a cutover migration, that means essentially you start your migration, you get it all ready, and you flip a switch. And that switch says, okay, now the email's going to a different system. That's a cutoff migration. Most districts will do this because you don't have 2,000 employees. All the rest of them, like a hybrid migration, when you're using 2 different servers for 2 different emails, those you're not going to need, because you might, I don't know of a district that has more than 50 employees or 100 employees or whatnot. I think if cutover migrations, I think, stop at 500 users. They don't suggest you do anything over that. But for us, a cutover migration will work. So essentially, you're taking that email from your current ISP and telling the World Wide Web, that we're not sent, please don't send email to our local ISP anymore. We're going to send it to Microsoft 365. And there's usually about a 3-day, they say a 3-day, 72-hour time frame that some of those DNS servers have not taken up that new location for the email. So it will go to the old email for a while, and then Microsoft 365 will take that email from the old server and bring it into the new system. So it takes a few days to do that. That's why most migrations work. They start them over a weekend, so that most people are not working over that weekend. This, I will stress, back up all your current emails to PST folders. That's a PST files are Outlook files for a lot of people. If you're using Outlook, it's probably going to a PST file already. You can export everything to a PST file and export emails and whatnot. It is a very nice thing to back up everything to a PST file when you're doing migrations, just in case you lose something or something goes wrong. Back up all those emails. How long it will take will depend on the size of those email folders. So if you have 10 years worth of email, it may take a while. So it might be a good thing to take all of those 9 years worth of emails, put them on a PST file, so the migration doesn't have to deal with 10 years of emails. So it depends on how many users and how many how big those mailboxes are. With Skagit's 11 mailboxes, it took a few hours to do. I didn't exactly time it. It was either 3 to 5 hours, and I did it in the morning and on a Friday, and it moved it all over. And then that 3 days of both systems running, and it went off without a hitch, except for one email system, one person I didn't have the correct password for, and I started hers up afterward, after everyone else got finished, and then that one only took like 20 minutes. A couple more things, other mailboxes. These 3 things don't need licenses. So for instance, a conference room. You can set up a shared or equipment room or a room, and it has an email address. But because it's not an individual user, that does not need a license to actually work. So you can have as many of these as you want. Also equipment, car rentals, whatnot. You can set up an account for this, so emails get sent to this, and it gets put on a calendar that everybody can see, hey, I've got the Ranger, the Ford Ranger for 10 o'clock on Tuesday till 2 o'clock. Also, there's shared mailboxes. The board and the staff and WCD are all shared mailboxes for us. All the board can get to the board one, all the staff can get the staff one, and the WCD one is the general mailbox for our conservation district. And there's, I think, three or four of us that can actually get to that, and it is essentially shared between multiple people. So you can create, for us, we have a small farm expo shared email, and the 4 people that work with the small farm expo can get to that email account. and it comes up in their Outlook. You can also set up groups, forestry, admin, team leads, staff board, etc. Please do kind of an onboarding checklist. So setting up user accounts on the new system, you need to have a system to actually be able to do this when you're setting someone up for working on these systems. So if you're setting up that new user, and it might be 11 users all at once Monday morning. So you need to get them signed in and set up, and probably before you do the full migration, so that they can get in there and learn to use it before that Monday morning. And please do have pilots and test subjects. Having a guinea pig to test all this before it happens will help out with all the roadblocks that you're going to face. And there will be some that you forgot about, and oh, we need to do this. We might need to do something before we migrate everybody else. What to move? This is all about email right now. Depending on the source system, do you want to remove every single subfolder in that inbox? Maybe not. You might want to have your users clean up their mailboxes before the migration, so that 10 years of email doesn't need to be brought over. Again, smaller size folders, less time to migrate. Go over this a little bit more. What won't migrate in SMTP migration? And this is coming from an old style Windows server. So address lists and distribution lists, calendars, back them up to an SMTP file. And on the right-hand side, this is the import-export wizard in Outlook you can get from the file menu, and you can export to a file and Outlook data file, and then you choose which folder that you want to export. And you can just do the entire folder if you want, and it just takes a while. If you use the same Outlook profile, these will be in the application when you point it to Microsoft 365. As long as you don't delete that profile, it should still be there. Migration of files. We're talking about SharePoint now. You should set up all your sites before, and sites, we're talking, you can look at them as their own little servers or folders. Set them all up before you do the migration, and do a lot of testing, and keep the names short. Down at the bottom, I put that there because it's nice and long. It was going to be easier to show that. Down at the bottom, you'll see one file and its file path, and the underlined portion is just what Windows Windows will put in there just because it is a SharePoint. So everything in that SharePoint folder will end up having that first, what is about 50 characters. If you don't go in and make sure that things are not over 260 characters long, you will probably have issues. And we had some major issues because we had nested folders especially for our farm plans that were up to like 600 characters long. So we had to go in there and shorten those folder path length, the folder file names, to something shorter so that we didn't have issues when we copied them over. And there are tools, if you want, you can give me a call. There are tools to help with that. It'll go through your file system and say, hey, these are 500 characters long or 300 characters long, and it'll give you a warning about what you need to change. We have had issues with older Excel opening 200, anything over 214. Some things said 214, some said 218 characters for older Excel files, they will not open. They'll give you an error. So you have to download them and then open them in desktop or change the file length. As soon as you get down under 214, it opens fine. But that's only older Excel. I'm not sure the newer one has that issue. Again, it could ruin your migration if you have too long of path names. This is also one of the reasons we have multiple sites. So we have a conservation planning, we have a CREP planning and a company. Could you put everything in company? Yes, but you'll end up with, if you do good organization, you may end up with massive path names. So instead, we did separate folders, SharePoint sites, and not everyone needs to get to the CREP folders. Not everyone needs to get to the conservation planning. So they just sync those particular folders. Do lots of organization before you start migrating files. And make sure you have a really large bandwidth when you're doing this migration. Don't try to do this when you have like a 5 megabit Comcast connection that drops every once in a while. You will have some major issues if you have that. Make sure it's a large bandwidth, large system that you can let sit and doesn't have any issues. So don't do this if you live out in a county. Do this on a very good internet connection. And please notify your users. I've heard bad stories about people coming in. They did the migration. They didn't tell anyone they did the migration. And everyone came in on Monday morning and everything's gone because communication stopped. We've done a few training videos, and you can use screen capturing programs. OBS Studio is a free program. It takes a little bit to set up, but is very powerful. Again, that's OBS Studio. And you can just screen capture everything you're doing and then save that as a file and put it into one of your teams, your IT teams, so anyone can get to it at any time. Or put it on the SharePoint or however you want to do that. Do it over a weekend. That's probably the best bet, especially if you have a lot of files. And do it if you're going to have multiple SharePoint sites, do them one at a time and just let people know you're doing them one at a time. And then after you've done it, remove the connection to the old files. And most people have like shares and that kind of stuff. Just take all those files, put them into an archive folder. So nobody accidentally opens that shortcut or that file from Word or Excel because they're just used to going into Excel and opening, oh, there's my recent files, and clicking on it. Well, that'll take them to the old file. So remove that connection somehow. And the easiest way to do that is create an archive folder and dump all those files into that archive folder. So all those links, those recent files will not work anymore. They're still there on the server or wherever you put them, but they're not connected anymore. When you're setting up teams, make sure you create your teams groups or teams before you actually make it live to all the users, so they're already set up in all this stuff. And because each team has members, you can decide which users are in which team. Like, not everyone needs to be in the admin team. Not everyone needs to be in the board team, so on and so forth. So do this before you do all the migration. And again, we go to training your users. Train those users with videos. Make sure they know what they're doing. There we go. And don't start random teams. make sure they know that. Don't just start a team up because, hey, I'm going to start a new team for this. Well, make sure they know that that team has to be there for another 2 years. Instead of creating a team, create a sub team in or a channel in that team instead. So my staff team has multiple channels in it. Yeah, the compliance stuff makes it very hard to delete teams. Another thing I want to stress about this team setup and all of the Microsoft 365, if you don't have backing from the major players like the board and especially the manager and the team leads or whatever, and if they're not using it, the rest of the employees won't use it. Essentially, you have to push and make sure everyone is using this, or it's essentially a wasted software. After everyone starts using it and they're being forced to use it, essentially, they start to understand what it can do and how it can be used for them. If you just say start using Teams and you don't do anything about it, nobody's going to. They'll use it for once or twice, but they won't actually get in there and start using it correctly. And after everyone learns it, it works out great and it becomes a lot easier to use. It's that the bell curve of the, what is that called? Yeah, whatever. Starting to learn stuff. Day after the migrations, have the users schedule time that, let's say the Monday morning, to learn the systems. Don't just have them come in and expect them to use it right away. Make sure they've scheduled out an hour or two to go through the tutorials, go through everything and learn it, because they will be very frustrated when they're under the time crunch later that day and go, where's that file? And they didn't take that time to learn the system. Be ready for lots of support calls. There will be lots of support calls. Things go wrong, they hit the wrong button. Just be ready for those support calls. Make instructional videos and then post them to Teams. OBS Studio, went over that already. So here is questions. Anybody have any questions? Nicole, has there been any questions coming in?
Yeah, there's been a couple of them, Andrew. So the first one, kind of early on in your presentation, have you gone away from a hardware server setup at your office now? You might have talked about that, but reiterate. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so no, we have not, for a couple of reasons. We still have, so most of our files are up on SharePoint. I guess I forgot to put that in this particular presentation. The two things that we've come across that do not work well with SharePoint. One is access databases. Unless there's only one person using that access database, it is not a good idea to put access databases on SharePoint. The reason being is it doesn't work well on SharePoint, because if two people have that same access database open, it's going to have problems and maybe corrupt that database. So we still have our hardware server. It's still a virtual server, but essentially it's a hardware server in the office to house our access databases that we need to use. There are a few of them, including our CREP database that's 20 years old now, that is rather large and we don't want it corrupted. So we're not going to put that on SharePoint. The other data sets that do not work well with SharePoint is GIS. And the reason being is, for instance, we have a 40 gigabyte aerial photo of Whatcom County. Imagine someone opening an ArcMap project and they now have to download 40 gigabytes of just that aerial photo. Oh, wait a minute, there's 5 other aerial photos in there and they're all 20 gigabytes. It does not work well with all that stuff. And then the synchronization issues does not work well. Essentially, so all of our GIS is done on our physical server here at the office. And we use, oh, Jesus, my mind went blank. Remote desktop software to do that. And you can use, if you don't want to pay the exorbitant prices of like TeamViewer and LogMeIn, and they are rather pricey for what they are, you can use Chrome Remote Desktop, which is free. As long as you have Chrome on both ends, you can log in with the same user account and see that remote desktop. And that's how we do GIS from outside of the office. Or they just come into the office, do their GIS, and then go home. Or they work from out of the office. So GIS, don't do GIS if you're working through SharePoint. It does not work and it will cause you problems.
Okay, thanks, Andrew. Another question here, has this migration over to 365 reduced IT costs in general and or reduction of having that server? And maybe it's like, yeah, maybe the setup, maybe after it's set up, let's say, but you can discuss both.
After it's set up, as long as everyone's learned everything after that first month or two, it may reduce, it may. The big thing is may. It depends on how your users work with it. A physical server at work, and if everybody's in the office, probably not. Because you don't, as long as you're doing updates to it, you're not doing any IT work with it. But as soon as you move it outside onto 365 and everyone's in the office, it might not. But if you're all working from home, yes, it will. You'll probably have a lot less IT issues. You'll probably have a lot of, oh, where's this file? Or I don't have access to this SharePoint drive. You'll have a lot of those, but it all depends on how you set it up, how many people you have. But it may increase IT costs, but it depends on, like for us, I'm the IT person, so they just call me and I fix it. But if you're calling an outside company, you might want to have one person in the office that really understands Microsoft 365 and they can just call that. So it kind of depends. But definitely during the setup process, there's a lot of IT work and technical support. Hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, thanks. There was also a comment in relation to this cost. Sora commented that as each staff gets a new computer in their district, they've upgraded that individual's Microsoft 365 account to include Office. It's been really nice because the expense is slowly increasing versus all at once. So some positive feedback for folks doing this. And then a more technical question for you, Andrew. Jess, can you explain the shared mailboxes and how do you know that everything has been followed up on?
I don't know if it's because the shared email boxes are shared between multiple people. They can see it, but I can't tell if they're actually paying attention to it. Yes, you can set it up to forward directly to that person's mailbox if you wanted to. But one thing you can do in Outlook is that shared email box. You can set it up so in Outlook it will actually show you under shortcuts. You can actually see where you can see the inbox in your shortcuts in Outlook. So you can have 5 different shared mailbox inboxes in there. So it will notify you and it'll say, hey, you've got 25 emails in here that have not been read. So you'll have to come up with some procedures in your district, how you want to do with that. Usually there's one person for a shared email box that is in charge of paying attention to that email box. And that way, that one person can say, hey, Karina, go check this email out, or something like that. But they all have access to it.
Thanks. That's all the questions we have currently in the questions box. I'll encourage folks, please put additional questions for Andrew into the questions box, or just raise your hand and I'll unmute you and you can ask your question directly to him. You know, sometimes it's a little easier to have a conversation when it comes to these technical elements. So I'm not seeing anything. I'll give folks a minute to type in, but Andrew, is there anything else that you want to add to this conversation as well?
I don't think so. Some of the questions may be answered in the next, was it blended in-person remote working options? That has some information if you're looking for more, how do I work from home kind of stuff. That may answer some questions or bring up more questions. And that is at 11 o'clock. Yes, that's the next one, isn't it? Yeah.
Yep.
But we'll see how that goes. Hopefully I'll get a few minutes before that starts.
Okay. Well, I will say as someone who is now a 365 user, I love it. As you know, from the employee standpoint, to be able to work from anywhere, from any computer, to be able to log into that system in a safe space is really, really nice. And or having more of those components integrated together. And the web interface versus your desktop versions are different. It's good for folks to know that, but it really does make a difference as an employee.